How many of you have built labs in the Skillable platform, in LOD? So again, a thumbs up if you've built labs on our platform, and how about a heart if you have not? We're going to keep it super positive, right? So we either see a thumbs up or we see a heart. So I'm looking over there at we got some thumbs up, got some hearts. All right. Now, another question, this one, just to mix things up a bit, I'm going to ask you to send a yes or a no into chat. So we're using this entire Teams interface before I even tell you anything. My question is, how many of you, and I know this will probably be a smaller number, have created scored labs in our platform? So if you've created a scored lab, give me a yes. If you've not created a scored lab, a no. And I don't expect to demand too much else from you, although you're going to have to pick a topic for demonstration in just a bit. So got some no's, which means I got one yes, but he's on my team, so I can still get away with it. So far, lab yes, scored no, yes, only in lab workshops. So okay. David also has. So the two definite yeses are on my team, so I can still get away with anything. No, this is actually great. And one of the things that I hope you take out of this is that the value, frankly, of adding scoring to your labs, which is both easy and also difficult. And I'll go into that, and not difficult in a scary way, but also you want to make sure that you do it right. So we're going to talk about the benefits of scoring labs. All right, so why do we want to score labs? We're also going to take a look at the types of scoring and activities that we have available within our LOD platform. All right, and I want to talk a little bit about writing. That should be writing scored labs. I swear I thought I updated it, but apparently I didn't. Writing scored labs, labs with activities. And then we get into the fun stuff, which is demonstration. Okay, and again, I really want you to see this, and we're not a huge group here, so please don't hesitate to ask questions, throw them in there, and we'll work on it together and see what we come up with. All right, question for you. For those of you, let's see, first I got to give you the really cool animations here. There we go. All right, setting the stage. Traditional labs. Traditional labs are great. I've written traditional labs for a very long time. And you know what? Traditional labs, learners complete the exercises. Good. And we assume that the learners complete the exercises. But generally speaking, there's no verification. There's no formal verification that the learners are successful. Now, I know a number of you mentioned that you had created labs, had not created scored labs. And so I want you to think about, in the labs that you've created, how do the learners know they're successful? How do you know that the learners are successful? And there's certainly ways that we can do that for the learners, right? We've written labs, you go and you do a bunch of stuff, and then you say, okay, to validate this, go check this out. Go see if this looks the way you want it to look. And that's fine. But as a lab author, as a sponsor of training, there's no real feedback loop for you with that approach to lab writing. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not that that's a bad way to do labs, and certainly we support that on our platform. But start to think, if we have scored labs, if I can go through the lab and I can get some immediate validation of what's going on and whether or not I've completed this lab or this exercise correctly, start to think about the value that can bring to your learners, to your lab authors, and also to the folks that are sponsoring, to the managers of those that are doing the training, right? So if I think about benefits of scored labs, I always want to think about the learner first. I have written an awful lot of labs. I am a Microsoft certified trainer and have been for over 25 years and have done more courses, more classes than I want to think about, right? And to me, all of this comes down to the reason why I still do this is it's about the learner. What does the learner get out of the lab? And look, I've taught courses with really good labs, and I've taught courses where the student finishes the lab and they say, okay, I went through all the steps. It looked like it worked, but I don't even know what I did, right? And that's something that, when we start looking at scoring, we start saying, okay, we're going to tell you exactly how you did. There's this immediate feedback that the learner gets with this kind of environment, right? For sure, right? And I think about the standard. Look, I've written labs like this. Okay, you did this. Now go check and verify. Make sure it looks like this. Well, maybe the user interface has changed. I do a lot of stuff in Azure. User interface changes all the time. Was it right? Was it not right? Hard to tell. But when we go and we say, all right, you click a button and you can say, okay, hey, cool, yeah, that worked. I have verified proof that what I did just now was right, right? And it gives you this ability to learn while doing. And one of the things pretty interesting, and I hope you have a chance that if hopefully you caught the first round of sessions, you caught Frank's keynote speech at the beginning of the day. But there's some really great stuff, and we were looking at I sat in on a case study of the benefits of scored labs just an hour ago, and one of the really cool things is you get the learners get with a lab, they get a safe environment. Love that term, right? Well, you get a safe environment to make mistakes. And so as a learner, I'm going through and I can try stuff. Hey, this is asking me to do this. I think I can do that. Let me try it. And then let me check to see if I got that right. Right. And so it gives me as a learner this ability to learn while doing. And so I think, and I've spent the most time out of this on the benefits of scored labs on the learner, because again, from my perspective, that is an incredibly important and valuable aspect of actually building and delivering labs. All right, question for you. And I'm not putting anyone on the spot, okay? And you don't have to answer this, but again, it's a yes or no question, okay? For those of you that have written labs, do you have a deterministic way to determine whether or not the content in the labs are effective, to determine whether or not the learner who's taking that lab has actually gotten something out of that lab? And I'm sure if you write labs, I'm sure they're amazing labs. And that's not in any way, shape, or form an indictment of writing labs. But if I'm not scoring the labs, how do I know whether or not they're effective, right? And just like I said, my passion is to get learners and to get that spark, and that is the biggest rush that I have in my career is when I see that spark that a learner got something they didn't get before, right? But when I write content, traditional content, when I write labs, I'll deliver it and then I'll ask students how it went, and that's great. But there's not a great way to do that. With scored labs, I can track that. As a lab creator, I can go and say, okay, let's see how people are doing, how well people are actually completing this lab, how well are they getting the concepts within this lab, and let me tweak that as a lab creator. Fantastic stuff. Now, the third really big benefit, from my perspective, the third really big benefit area is for managers. And I have to tell you, if you weren't in on the case study validating skills development, there is some fantastic content. That was one of the sessions just an hour ago I happened to sit in on, and looking at Comtech and how they have just built this amazing portal, their own portal based on our API, based on our LTI, but they built their own portal with this phenomenal amount of information that their clients, their customers, the people that contract with them can use to get very detailed assessment of how their people are doing. Universities, governments, right? So you get this information, and one of the terms I love, and I know this term is a little bit overused, but the concept of data-driven decisions, right? And for me, a big part of scored labs. On the learner side for me, it's about that immediacy. It's about not just the immediacy, but not having to guess, okay, this is right or this isn't right, I need to go fix it, right? But in terms of everything else, it's this data that's available. And that's a huge thing. You're not going to get the data available, at least directly from our platform, unless you're scoring your labs. Now, you could write your own scoring infrastructure, but we do have one, which is pretty cool. So, just kind of think about that. Think about your customers, and I'm going to ask another yes/no question. This one I'm going to ask you for a response, and that is, how many of you in your organizations have a deterministic overview of how your employees are faring in terms of hands-on work that may be assigned? And you may not know it, so question mark is fine. But so do you have a way currently in your organization of managers being able to look at the data and say, yep, okay, this person's great, this team's great, or whatever. So just if you can give me a yes or no or a question mark if you're not sure in the chat. I told you I would be forcing you to participate. Great, Bob. That is a great answer. Yeah, and that's a very traditional way, and it's not a bad way of doing it, right? I think being able to do post assessments is great. Asking folks questions, did they get it? Absolutely great. During onboarding, yes. Question for after, fantastic. Mason, I'm gonna pick out. Is that an assessment, like sort of a question and answer kind of assessment, or is it an actual hands-on? And Mason, both. All right, outstanding. All right, cool. So those are really a range, and different folks will look at this different. Now we're going to get into that. All right, that's all the hey, here's why you want to do it. And I hope you do understand that there are some great reasons for creating scored labs. Now let's talk about what this actually is within the Skillable environment. All right. And really, I've broken out the way that you can score labs into 3 categories. And there's a little more nuance, but broadly speaking, I think it's pretty fair to put it into these categories. The first is practice. Okay. And this is really just for the learner. And it's what we often refer to low stakes or no stakes. The learner's going through, and there's validation for the learner, but it's not being captured, right? And the learner can go and they can see whether or not, they can click a button and they can see whether or not they were successful on the task. And if they were successful, great, they can move on. If they weren't fully successful, then they can go fix it, or they can move on if a lab, doesn't necessarily need what was there before, right? But again, that's just like, hey, learner focus, completely learner focus, very valuable to me. Right? The next is scored. All right, and literally you'll see it's a check mark. It's a couple check marks, but not much. A scored lab. So with the scored lab, the score is actually recorded. All right, when the user works on their instance, we capture instance data. Then that's what we call it. If you're not familiar with the Skillable parlance, is we have a lab profile. You've built your lab profile, and a learner clicks launch or launches it through your LMS, and they go through and they have a lab instance, and every lab instance has a unique ID. And then that scoring, if we have a scored lab, when they go through and they complete the lab, it's going to be scored, for lack of a better term, at the end, and that score is going to be recorded with the instance, and it can be retrieved. Now, the third type is performance testing. And I will tell you the difference between types 1, 2, and 3 is more conceptual than it is tactical in terms of the way that you build your labs. It's very easy to take a practice-based lab profile and convert that to a scored and then convert it to performance testing. Now, I wouldn't probably do that because the goals of the testing in performance testing are often different, right? That a lot of times that really is a competency assessment. So you are giving someone a hands-on environment that also, by the way, may have questions, different types of questions, but you're going to score that, and that's going to be scored at the end. They submit the lab when the learner thinks they've got it right, then they submit the lab, all right? And then it gets scored, and then that score is recorded. Again, from a practical standpoint, from an operational standpoint, the way you build it, there's not significant differences between those three, but I think it is really important to understand conceptually that there's differences. And that's a big part. That's in a sense the hard part of scoring a lab. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, what do we have within our platform? What are the different ways that you can score activities? And we use the term activities, and I have to be careful because I still, in my head, I just, on a personal level, hopefully our marketing VP is not listening right now, I prefer the term assessment. It's not what we use. So if I use the word assessment, like in the agenda there, my apologies, they're activities, okay? So we have different types of activities. My favorite, and what is to me the most interesting, is scripted activities. And these are where we can write scripts against the actual environment that the learner is using. And we can assess, there I go again, we can assess that environment based on what they've done, right? And so this is real world checking, not checking how they've done it, right? Checking what they've done. And that is something that I love about the ability to do scripted activities. And that's going to be a big part of the focus when I finally stop talking enough to get to a demonstration. We also have different types of questions. And I'm going to get to in a moment kind of conceptually why you would want to use one over the other. And then there's also certain practical reasons for it. A lot of the standard questions you might have. We have multiple choice questions that can be single answer, multiple answer. We have short answer. We also have short answer with pattern matching. And there is zero chance that I'm going to demonstrate short answer with pattern matching because that requires using regex, and I have to take pain relievers anytime I am forced to use regex, and which is more often than I would like to admit. And I guarantee you, one person on this call right now is itching to say something about that, but has been told that they're not allowed to give me a hard time during this presentation. All right, so those are the types of activities we have. Now, look, I like joking around, I like making it fun, but for me, this is really serious. Like, okay, hopefully I'm convincing you of the value of writing scored labs. All right, that was that first little bit. Okay, so you're going to write a scored lab. How are you going to do this? First thing that you need to do is you need to define measurable objectives. Okay. Question for you again. I told you, forcing you to interact here. Think about your environment. Okay. Think about I have no idea, and frankly, you can make it up. But if you've written a lab, what is an objective that you think is measurable? Something that you could prove to say, and by measurable, I don't mean that it has to be on a scale of 1 to 100. I mean something that you can check and you can measure and you can be quantitative about, even if it's on or off. So that's a question for you, is what's an example of a measurable objective? And I'll give you one. Okay, it's possible that it might come up in a demonstration. Let's say that I've got a lab that I've written where it's an Azure Cloud Slice lab in our environment, and I want the learner to provision a storage account, and I want that learner to also set a particular option on that storage account. Well, both of those things, both of those objectives are measurable. I can actually run a script against Azure to see if a storage account was provisioned. I can also run a script against Azure to see if a setting was defined. So got some great, some awesome examples coming in. Damien, database creation, fantastic. Mason, we've got expected data results after writing a query. We have actually an entire couple of series that we put in a few months ago that are entered to database courses, and we did exactly that. We had had the learner write a query, save the query, then we could run the query via a script and check to see the results. Awesome stuff. Student is able to spin up something. Absolutely. Simple text file creation on the desktop, and and in fact, I do that. And maybe even thinking about beyond simple creation, maybe looking for some content within a file that's on the desktop or some other path. Fantastic stuff. And again, it's kind of similar thing from Chris. File exists in a specific location. Those are all great. Okay, those are measurable objectives, right? Those are things you can verify. The next thing, and it's funny, this is a term that I absolutely love. And part of it is I think I've read some of the backend documentation for this. All right, and not everybody loves this term, but I do. And that is desired difficulty, right? One of the really cool things with defining measurable objectives, and by the way, this is going to be a plug, so sorry, but is that you also want to make the learner work a little bit, right? So I can, and there's validity here, and we in fact have labs that do this. I can write a lab that gives every single step, right? Kind of very traditional, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then rather than looking up something, you can check it, right? And we can write a script to do that, and that's fine. But if we're adding in this scoring, right, maybe we take that up just a little bit, right? Maybe we don't directly give the learner every single step, but instead we give them some tasks to complete. We say, you know what, I may not directly tell you how to provision a storage account, but here's the storage account. Go provision a storage account that looks like this, that has these settings, okay? All right, and maybe you give some help for that, okay? Or again, maybe your desired level of difficulty is you just want to give them step by step. That's fine, but think about that, identify that, right? Identify how much you want to give the user and the learner, all right? And then also think about doing this in terms of scenario-based labs. And what does that mean, right? Well, if we're defining measurable objectives and we're defining tasks, tie that together into some kind of scenario. And I will tell you, there's a lot of labs, a lot of traditional labs that I think do a good job of this, but not all do. And this really is more lab writing than anything else, but I thought I'd throw it in here because it definitely applies to scored labs as well, right? So if a user goes in and user just says, okay, exercise 1, build this, exercise 2, build that, that's a little bit hard to follow through the path. But on the other hand, if you say, you know what, here's a scenario. You are an Azure administrator and you need to provision storage for a department, and they have certain needs and requirements, and you're going to fulfill these requirements through the lab, right? And that really kind of sets it up to drive towards those measured objectives, okay? Now, similarly, design the correct activities. And this goes to that answer of both, right? And that Mason was kind enough to give me, right? We support scripted activities where it's going to go into your environment, but we also support questions. And I think there's good room for both of those. And it depends on what your objective is, right? And for me, questions are really good at verifying conceptual understanding, right? Okay, what is a storage account, right? What are the different options for how you can make a storage account resilient, okay? But then you've got the scripted activities, which are more operational, more tactical. Can you actually create this? Can you actually write this code, right? These are the things that you want to think about. And so, we have scripted, and I will tell you, because it's something we have, we are always about, thinking about adding scripted activities first, because it's cool, right? But there's some conceptual stuff. We've got an outstanding data scientist that is writing challenges for us. And oh, and by the way, the plug is that, and John mentioned this, we, if you're not familiar, we have over 1,000 different what we call challenge labs, and they're scenario based, and they've got different desired difficulty levels. Definitely something that I recommend you check out. All right, I'm not going to try to do too much plugging, but that's something I think is worthwhile. But in our challenge labs team, we're starting to build out some data science labs, and I had this great conversations, some serious conversations with our subject matter expert about the right way to score the data science, right? And on the one hand, yes, you want the tactical, you want to know how to make a data frame, you want to know how to generate different types of graphs, and that's important, right? And that's tactical, but you also need to understand how to analyze those, right? And so we might have at one desired difficulty level just the tactical, just the, hey, create a line graph, create a pie chart, right? But at a higher level of difficulty, we might say, okay, you create these things, but looking at that line graph, looking at that pie chart, what's the right answer to this question? And I'm not the data scientist, so I'm not going to come up with the question. It's probably a bad analogy for me to start down since I didn't have that. But the point is that there's a need for both, and that's what you need to think about when you start talking about designing the correct activities. Is think about the right activity that matches what the objective is for a particular lab, for a particular task or a particular requirement within a lab. All right, and the last thing. And this is the warning. Okay. There's a word, psychometrician. It's fun to say, okay, but it also has meaning. Great question there. I'll get to in just a second. It also has some really important meaning, right? And if you're not familiar with the term, it's basically somebody that pretty much looks at tests and determines the validity of the test. Now, why do I bring this up? Because, if you're going to add questions as activities, great. Think about the meaning of those questions. Make sure you're asking them right. There's a whole science behind it. If you're going to create scripted activities, I almost said activity-based activities. That wouldn't have been right. That was the hesitation, just so you know. If you're going to write scored activities, you're going to write, there we go again, scripted activities. Writing scripts can be hard. I think our environment is great for it, right? And not surprisingly, on a demonstration level, I'm going to show you some pretty easy scripts to write and some pretty easy ways to integrate some stuff, right? But generally speaking, scripts can be kind of hard to write. So as you were thinking about the overall instructional design that your lab is part of, make sure that you build in the resources, both in terms of having the right expertise on the team, as well as making sure that you're building in a little bit of time for defining the activities and also testing them, right? And that's something, look, there's a higher cost to this, right? And how much a higher cost? It's very dependent, right? Again, if you go and you take a look at that video on the case study, they invested a lot into their scripting capabilities, just phenomenal stuff, right? Because it was worth it, and they've got an amazing business built on that, and it's proved to be instrumentally valuable, right? I think when you see what you can do, the idea is worth the incremental cost. I really do. Honestly, I wouldn't work here if I didn't think that was the case. So those are the big things. Now, we've got a great questions. Got from Jennifer, can Skillable write scored labs on proprietary software? Where? All right. The answer, Jennifer, to your question is probably yes. Okay, I'm going to take this one. I'm going to grab it. and take that. So we have multiple what we call fabrics, just platforms. It's a nice term for platform. All right, we have 2 different virtual machine fabrics. We've got a fabric running on ESX VMware, and we have a fabric running on Hyper-V. We also have cloud slice fabrics. Right now, if you were at the keynote, you know that we've got 2 cloud slice fabrics. We've got Azure, we've got AWS, and we're adding Google Cloud imminently. Okay? We also have a container fabric. And coming out literally today or tomorrow, we have some tweaks to the container fabric that will actually let it work with just about any type of container that supports a web UI. So if you've got custom software, right, and that custom software is containerized and it's got a web UI, there's a really good chance that we could take that container and we can run it in our environment. Now, there's some tweaks that have to happen, more so because of the complexities of containers running behind reverse proxy. Then if those words are all word salad to you, that's fine. Okay, but it works, right? And also, if you've got custom software that runs on a virtual machine, it is highly likely that we have you covered. There's some other use cases that are pretty amazing that folks are doing where they're using our platform really as a launch point into their own software. We've got some great stuff coming up with it. Okay. All right. So yeah, there we go. All good stuff. Now we get into demonstration. I've given myself 25 minutes. What we're going to do, we're going to take a look, and I guarantee you this can take up 25 minutes. I'll take 24 minutes and give you a minute to ask questions, but I love the fact that questions are coming in already. So we're going to take a look at adding scoring to a lab. All right, we're going to look at the experience of taking a scored lab, and we're going to take a look at reviewing lab scores. All right, those are the 3 things that we're going to demonstrate, and I'm going to give you an option. Okay, I've got 2 demonstrations teed up. I've got an Azure demonstration and a Node.js demonstration. Both of these, and again, I hope Kristen's not listening and no one else with authority is listening. It's entirely possible that I finish up these demonstrations at about 1:45, somewhere, maybe a little bit earlier than that. But I did test them, so they both should work. So your choice, you're going to have to, once again, I am forcing your hand here. We can do an Azure demonstration, or we can do a Node.js demonstration. And one thing to note, Mason, not trying to push you in a direction, but the Node.js is really exactly the same environment that we use for Python. All right, so far we have a tie. We have 1 vote for Azure. We have 1 vote for the container framework. And we've got more than 2 people here. John's going container. All right, well, we at least have the tiebreaker. Uh-oh. Oh my gosh, we're like about even. Wow, that's so cool. We are just about 50-50. All right. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1. Oh, 7 to 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, it was 7 to 4. Although I'll say 4.5 because I got Azure from David. I got Azure with an exclamation mark, but that's still enough, not enough to carry the day. If it had been a tie, John, you are now kicked off this call. No, not really. But we're going to run something on container fabric. Now, there was a question that came in, lost on the difference from Jennifer. Great question. So we have these different fabrics, and if you were, let's say, creating a lab on cybersecurity, you would probably use our virtual machine, probably running on our ESX, with probably some combination of Linux machines and maybe some Windows machines. And we have a lot of challenges and a lot of customers that are doing those things, right? If you're writing a lab on, if your environment is really about Windows machines and it's on-premises Windows machines, then you're probably also going to want virtual machines, probably on the Hyper-V. We have these other fabrics. We have container fabrics. If you're used to containers, containers are amazing. They're little self-contained environments that you can deploy, and that's incredibly oversimplified example, but you pretty much deploy these fully contained applications anywhere. The application thinks it's on its own machine. It's great stuff. Okay, and we have the support for that. And then we also have Cloud Slice, and Cloud Slice is where you can allow your learners to interact with a cloud environment without having to have their own subscription or account or anything else. It's all managed by you. You control what they do and what they can do. And so that's the difference between the two. All right, with that though, we do have a majority heading towards Node.js. So hopefully, I'm going to run this correctly. Okay, so I have a lab, and there's going to be some serious cheating. Now, I will tell you, this is actually a version of a challenge lab that is currently in our QA process, and the true version of this is already scored. So I'm going to make this super simple for me to do. Okay, but setting up the overall environment, this is running on our cloud environment. We're actually running Visual Studio Code in a container, right? And this supports a pretty wide variety of development environments. Okay, we also have coming out, as you might have heard Frank say, we've got Jupyter coming out. I probably mentioned it as well. Changes to our fabric are allowing us to do that, and many other things we're going to be able to put out. Fantastic stuff. Okay, let me show you what we have here in instructions. Now, I won't. I think I've forced enough yes/no questions on you, so I won't force a yes/no. But this is styled in our new format for challenge labs. Okay, and so we kind of have this new clean format, and actually one of our attendees was instrumental in bringing this on. All right, and there are some requirements. So this is, you're a Node.js developer, you're creating a utility that's going to load and read and modify sales data into a MongoDB database. If you don't know what MongoDB is, doesn't matter. If you don't know what Node.js is, doesn't matter. I'm not going to make you actually code as part of this demonstration. This is just about being able to interact. So I've got this container. It's a Visual Studio Code container, right? And I want to add some scoring to it, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here into this, well, be useful if I go into the area where it's actually, where I can actually add stuff, not the WYSIWYG. All right, yeah, that's the right place. Okay, I'm going to put my cursor there because I'm going to add this in. All right, so if you have created labs in our environment, you're going to be familiar with the instruction editor. That's where I am. If you haven't, we have our own flavor of Markdown we call IDLX. All right, and this is an editor for it with lots of cool WYSIWYG capabilities. Right, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some activities. And I'm actually going to add a couple of different activities. Now, the first thing that I will generally do when I add activities is I'm going to add a group. So I'm going to go new group. Okay, and this is going to be, I'm just going to call it questions. Okay. I can randomize this. I do want this to be on demand. And I'm going to create a custom, and we're going to say score. Let me give this. I'm going to have an activity group for questions. And hopefully everybody can see that okay. Make that a little bit bigger. All right, I'm going to save that. All right, I'm going to create another group. And this is terrible naming. Don't name your groups this, but oops. Some on-demand evaluation. Verify. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the demonstration. No, it's not. I promise. We're going to do something useful. All right, I'm going to add a couple of questions. Oops, that was not what I meant to do, but that's okay. I just showed you how to insert something unintentionally. I'm going to click new question here. It really is not that hard to use. All right, so I'm going to define a question, and that question is going to be what color is the sky? All right, and I've got different types of questions. So I've got multiple choice single answer, multiple choice multiple answer. Short answer, exact match, short answer, regex match. And I'm going to add some answers. Blue, green. Green sky is bad. Purple, good if you're a Prince fan. And I want to see a magenta sky, but as we all know, the sky is blue, so that will be our correct answer. Now, a couple things that I can do here. First of all, I want to randomize the answer sequence, all right? And then I've got this ability to give feedback. And this is something, when I say you want to design it, I'm going to put something here, and I'm going to be very just cavalier about it, right? But this is kind of important. What are you telling the learner, particularly if they get it wrong? Are you giving them lots of information? Are you not? Okay. Also, very important, are you going to allow retries? But we're just going to say correct. And then we'll say not correct. And I would be, if it were not for wanting to save time in a demo, giving more than this. But all right, so we're going to save that question. I'm going to add one more question, and it's going to be equally impressive. New question here. And this is going to be, please do not ask questions like this. We do have good questions, I promise. All right, and I'll be doing an exact match. And the answer is going to be lowercase Tracy, because I don't believe in worrying about capitalization. All right, it is not case sensitive though, which is good. Okay, and I'm going to say, hey, and then that is not your name. Okay. We have some questions. Outstanding. And you can do that, and that's valid, right? And we can use that, but that's not what is of most interest to me. Now, the other thing that I want to do here is I want to add some actual scripted validation. Okay, so I'm going to go into scripts. I'm going to add a new activity. Here's where it gets interesting. All right, so I'm going to give this a name, and this is going to be connect to the MongoDB database, MongoDB collection, excuse me. I'll give it a replacement token. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to display scripts as a task list. Okay, I'm going to allow retries for now. We can come back and change that up if we want. Okay, and in fact, we will change it up at the end. I'm going to type incredibly fast. There's no way I'm simply copying this from something else. This is how fast I type. Okay, so I've got some of the basics here. Okay, so first thing I'm doing is I'm verifying that the MongoDB npm package has been installed. All right, cool. I'm going to add another script, and then I promise we're getting to see this. Oh, before I add the other script, what would probably be useful is actually adding the script. Now, a couple things I need to do. First of all, I actually have multiple. This is such a cool environment we have. I have multiple containers, and I have to say, okay, what container do I want to run this against? I'm going to run this against our code server. That's where we've got our containerized web-based interface for Visual Studio Code. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to check to make sure that MongoDB is at. Again, you don't have to care. This is just a bash script that's running against our environment to check to make sure the environment is set up correctly. Okay. So for those of you that were like, I didn't want to do Node.js, don't worry about the details too much. And then the next thing that I want to verify is that the code actually connects to a MongoDB database. Okay, and well, that's kind of interesting. That needs, some things that need to get fixed with this. Good. Okay. Side benefit. Now, again, this is a script that's going to run in our environment. And by the way, this ability to choose a target, if you are in a virtual machine-based environment, you're going to be able to choose which virtual machine you're going to run your scripts against, which is pretty cool stuff. Okay. Now, in this case, this is a code-based lab. All right. And what I've done in this lab is I've set up a kind of a test framework that runs that allows the learner to add code into one file, and then I test that with a different file, right? And I don't care, in this case, I'm not looking for, okay, how did you go about doing it? I'm looking to make sure that the learner completed the task, right? And so to do that, I'm looking at the outcome of the task. I could, and there may be reasons I could go and I could pull the file and I could do regex testing across the file to make sure they put in the right kinds of structures. We actually do that with some of our data science, right? But in this case, I just, you know what? I just want to see and make sure that your code is doing what it's supposed to do. All right, so I've got that, right? I've got measurable objectives there, and I've got those objectives tested. Okay. Now I'm about to insert this one in here, so we should have them both. Now, before I go farther, I want to give you an opportunity, right? That is literally putting scripts into putting activities scoring into a lab. Okay, I did forget one thing, but are there any questions right now? I see a hand up from Jennifer. Jennifer, you want to open up your mic? Or you can type.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. So, all right, and I apologize. I don't know if I know what I want. But I don't know all the details behind it, right? So, essentially, we have virtual machines, right, that are running in a Windows environment. So if we had that, right, because I understand the scripting process, right, do you have to understand the software architect of our proprietary applications in order to do that? Or does it somehow pick it up?
Well, here's the thing. Great question. And the answer is sort of, or actually the answer is it depends. Okay. And in order for our scripting to work, there has to be something to script against.
Okay? Exactly. That's why I was kind of confused. Yeah. If
you've got proprietary software and it's running on a Windows VM, right? Now, Windows VM is going to support PowerShell. Does your proprietary software support scripting? Like, are there PowerShell commandlets that are defined for your software?
Yeah, I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, I work in a healthcare company, so we have different products that we sell, right? And each of them, anything from CAT scans to diagnostic equipment, chemistry analyzers, right? So let's just say I take something like I want to, add quality control for within our software, right? To do that. And I want to make sure that that person has actually been able to successfully add quality control or successfully add this, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, I don't design the applications, right, but yeah.
So here's the thing. You would need to know the architecture enough to know how to test that, right? Is there a configuration file that gets created and you could then interrogate that file, right? Pull the file in and do regex testing against specific patterns that you're looking for that somebody would have had to set up in a configuration file? Or is there some kind of output file? Or is there some way to actually script directly against your environment that makes sense? And I'm going to go on and that, by the way, I would suggest, great question, Jennifer. You might want to pop into the Ask the Experts later and get a really good broad answer for that. But the answer is, as long as we can write a script on a Windows machine against something to test, then you can do it, is really what it comes down to. Okay.
Thanks.
One other thing, great question. Thank you so much. One other thing I do want to show you. I mentioned the fact that this is scoring. I didn't turn on scoring. We're going to have this scored. We're not going to make it performance testing, so we're just going to do some regular scoring. Okay. And I'm going to show detailed results. Now, one thing that's pretty interesting, as soon as I hit scoring, I get this score and it's practice by default. Okay. What I need to do is I need to go in here and I need to say, yep, that is scored. Now, as soon as I score an item, I can specify the weight of that item. I'm going to score everything as 1, but you can wait. Actually, I'm not going to score everything as 1. I just fibbed. Okay, I'm going to score that as 1. I'm going to score this also as 1. Okay, and then I'm going to go into my scripts. I'm going to score the scripts. And I'm going to give each of my scripts a value of 2. All right. So I now have a scored lab, and I can see that it's pretty cool. I can see up here I've got a score of 1 and 1. Here I've got a score of 4. Okay, and I have the ability to set up what is a passing score. Okay, I'm going to say 4. Right, and so what that means is, in this case, I'm saying, look, if either you get both of the tactical things correct, or if you get both of the questions and one of the tactical things correct, then you're going to have a passing score. Okay, enough of that. Let's run this. Okay, I am going to go ahead and launch this. So this is, are you kidding me? Hold on, let me try to launch one more time. Nice. Awesome. Okay. Well, that's fun. All right, we're gonna have to pull up one. That is, I'm gonna give this, I really wanted this to work. Let me check my lab instances real quick. Live demos. Oh, all of that was Seattle. Okay, let's try launching this in Venerable Tampa. Whew. Okay, crisis averted. Pretend none of you saw that. All right, here I am. I'm in my environment now. All right, and I can go, and if I go down here to the bottom of this page, okay, so here, and I could have had all of this in one grouping, okay, and I didn't, and there's a reason. So I can say, okay, let's answer some questions here. Okay, I'm going to score that. All right, hey, I got the right name. I can see right away. Okay, that was not correct. Let's try that. Right, and so I'm being a little bit flip here, but this is important. And somebody actually mentioned this, David, right? Mentioned that giving a student a hint and the incorrect answer feedback. Now, probably a better hint than just, that was wrong, but, giving them a hint and letting them try again is pretty cool. So we'll try that and say, hey, cool, I got both of those. Now I'm going to put that back to wrong so we can just kind of check out what that does with scoring, right? And I am going to do a little bit of lab work here. So let's pull up terminal and a couple things, prep some data here. There's 2 things I have to run, and then I'm just going to copy paste a bunch of stuff. So again, you're not going to have to watch. I have 3 minutes to finish this out. Like I said, well, 2 minutes because I'm going to give you 1 minute for Q&A. All right, let's get that in there. And then this up. Again, I type incredibly fast. I've now written all the code for that. Okay. And so now I'm going to go ahead and verify this. So now I'm running those scripts that I just wrote, and they're coming back successfully. Okay. So I now have some successful answers and some unsuccessful answers. And I have a bunch of other stuff that is not really critical here. Now, because it's scored, I'm going to submit. And again, right now I'm the learner, right? I switched from the content creator to the learner, and I say yes, and it actually goes and it scores it again, all right? And that is it didn't take terribly long. So here is the output that I get built in to our environment, okay? So I've got, here's the answers. This is what, if you're going straight from our environment, what you would see. All right, I have probably a minute. Yeah, I have a minute. Told you I generally don't have to worry about going long. Now, going short. What if I'm the content creator? I said there was benefits for 3 people, right? There's benefits for the learner. You're getting that feedback. It's validated feedback, okay? You don't have to guess. I got that right. I didn't get it right. I didn't get it right. Let me try again. I think that's awesome stuff, okay? But what if you're the content creator? Well, I can go in our environment. This is our LOD environment. One day to be Skillable Studio. All right, and I can see who has launched my labs, okay? And I see not only have I just launched this, but my colleague, Hans, was ready to bail me out in case this didn't quite work right, and he had launched one as well. All right, so this is cool, but I can get a little more information. I can go down here, and I can go exam passed. Exam score. And why not? What's the passing score? Okay, so let's search that again. All right, and so now I'm seeing I've got my 3 very unfortunate lab creation failed here, right? But I'm seeing that, okay, these people have taken it. Only one person has passed, okay? And I can actually dive down and I can view, depending on my rights, you may not be able to dive down depending on your rights, but I can actually see how things are going. Okay. Now you can do this in other places as well, right? But the point is, as a content creator, as a lab author, right? I now have a verified way to see that, yeah, this content is hitting the mark, right? That my learners are successfully achieving what I want them to achieve. All right, I'm now past time. All right, I'm gonna say a quick thank you, but there's a little bit more if you can just give me another 2 minutes. Told you, I can't go short. Sorry, probably won't be invited to do this again. But what about if you are a manager? What if you're the sponsor? Okay, well, we have really 2 ways of accessing our environment, right? It's really actually one way. You access our environment through an API, whether it's through standard REST API or through the LTI interface, right? You can integrate that way. We also have our own learning management system we call TMS, or training management system. This is actually some screenshots. I've scrubbed any personally identifiable information from them, right? But I could come in here as an instructor. I could come in here as a manager and see how things are going, right? And so I've got things like, was this a passing score? What was their score? Okay. I also have the ability to export that information directly from here. Okay. And I also can view the details. Right. In this case, this was a terrible result. Nothing was right. Mine would have looked much better from here. But that to me is pretty cool stuff. Now, there's one other thing that I want to show you, and this is deep, deep, deep in the weeds. And see if we can't zoom in a bit here. This is a call to our API. It's a call I ran earlier against another instance. And if I had launched what I just launched through the API, then I would be able to call this. This is just using a tool called Postman. What's important, though, is if I look, I can see the results. Okay, so if you have your own system, you can retrieve all of this information. You have the raw data to do whatever you need to do. And I think that's pretty phenomenal. All right. That was the last bit of what I wanted to present to you. Hopefully, you've gotten a feel for how to score labs, why it's important to score labs. You've gotten a quick view of the learner's perspective of a scored lab, and also some of the things you can do with the data from that scored lab. If you have any other questions, we have a question from Mason right there, and then really, I so much apologize that I couldn't hit the time mark. But the question is there a way for an instructor to bump someone to the next session if they cannot get the answer correct, assuming some kind of lab software issue that makes it better to skip? So the answer to that is it depends. You can write scripts. So if you can script it, you could, for example, you could have a button, and we do this, where let's say somebody goes and they try and they don't get it right, they try again and they're getting frustrated, right? When they try, if they don't get it right, you could add a button that says, complete this requirement, right? And if it's scriptable, you could write a script that goes and does it. We actually have labs that do that. So, as long as it's something that can be scripted, the answer to your great question, Mason, is yes. Also, depending on the environment you're in, we do have over-the-shoulder capabilities for our instructors, so conceptually an instructor could get in there and help out. Okay, those would be the two easiest ways. I will tell you some really interesting stuff. That case study where they actually collect live data from our system into their system during lab time, and that could be bidirectional. So we don't have a framework for building that externally to our, say, scripting, but it's certainly possible to do that as well. Oh yeah, and activity outcomes are awesome. That's a great point, David. I appreciate you bringing that up. All right. Couple things, resources. Now it's 10 minutes. I made a lie out of this slide. A couple things. Kristen has mentioned that we have an Ask the Expert coming up in 10 minutes. Please do complete a course evaluation. Get in touch with us on social media. If you tag us, you can win a prize at Skillable. And you can always email events@skillable.com. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day. I appreciate you being here. Hope you have a good rest of your day. And you can always get in touch with me if you need to, tracy.wallace@skillable.com.